So hello learners, welcome back. I know it's been long since we made a video, but actually I couldn't get enough time to make one. But now that we're here, let's start with the long-awaited Deever's characterization. Deever, the daughter of Steve Deever. I think we've read it enough times to remember all the characters by now. Steve Deever, business partner of Joe Keller. Joe Keller, Chris Keller, and Larry Keller, and Kate Keller are one family, and Steve Deever, Ann Deever, and George Deever is one another family. So Steve Deever, business partner of Joe, surfaces in the play in Act One and is described by Jim, Frank, and Keller as a beautiful and intelligent girl. So by this we know that Ann Deever is a beautiful and intelligent girl who is adored by each of Jim, Frank, and Keller. So basically, what we're trying to convey here is that Ann is a lovely, beautiful, and intelligent girl who is adored by everyone around her. Ann Deever is 21 years old. I think this is the first time that we come to know of Ann Deever's age. Anyways, Ann Deever is 21 years old with gentle looks and firm belief. She is admired for her beauty by Kate, Joe, and Chris. Kate Keller, Joe Keller, and Chris Keller. Seeing her previous house, Anne feels nostalgic and is reminded of her childhood days that were filled with happiness when she had stayed with her family in the neighborhood. So when Ann Deaver comes back to visit Chris Keller. So basically, what the thing is that the Deavers and the Kellers were basically used to live in each other's neighborhood. But ever since Steve Deaver went to jail, the Kellers, the Deavers, that is Ann Deaver and George Deaver, they moved out and started living their separate lives. And now Ann Deaver has come back to where she used to live because Chris is still living there. So Ann has come back, and when she looks at her house where she used to live, she feels she has a feeling of nostalgia. Nostalgia means a sentimental longing or wistful affection for a period in the past. So a kind of feeling, a kind of soothing feeling, you can say it can about remembering your past, like I wish the past days could come, I wish things were the same as in the past, like you were having a kind of longing towards some particular moment towards some particular time in your past. That's what nostalgia is. So N is having this nostalgic feeling, and she's reminded of her childhood days which were full of happiness when she had stayed in the family. Like I guess probably most of you also think nowadays, now that you've grown up so much, that our early days when we were small kids used to run around here and there naked and play with toys and all that stuff. Those were the days, and now it's just full of stress and burden. We have to work hard each day to make our life happy and successful. But at those times we didn't have any worries about anything. We didn't have any tension, any stress. We would just play and do our work and enjoy life in all and all. But now there's a lot of things going around. So the same feeling is here received by Ann Deaver. Now moving on, she comes to the Keller household in order to marry Chris. This we absolutely know. She comes with the purpose of rescuing Chris from the demoralized family haunted by Larry's ghost. So I believe this is very much clear already. So according to her point of view, she has come to rescue Chris from her demoralized family. There's the morale in Chris's family is very down because of a lot of things happening. Because Kate is still not letting go of Larry's past. She still believes that Larry is still alive and would come back. And N is this you can say there's a kind of surfacing tension inside the family, kind of deep buried tension that seems to be surfacing up, and it can be felt by everyone around. So Endeavor has come with this mission, this you can say this purpose in mind, that she wants to rescue Chris from this demoralized family, which is also haunted by Larry's ghost. So which also includes here Larry's ghost means Larry's memory, and haunted by means worried by, which is also worried by Larry's memory. For Joe Keller, she is the ghost of the past. So for Joe Keller, according to Joe, she is a person. Ghost here does not exactly means the same as ghost. It basically means a memory or a person of the past. So for Joe Keller, she is a ghost of the past. That is, she is a person, a memory of the past, a threat to him, who would reveal the truth of the defective cylinder case. So Joe is actually scared and worried of Anne, sorry, because he believes that she may pose a threat to him and his reputation, and she may say, or she may have found out some things against him that may dissemble his family unity. Anne is not waiting for Larry to return from the war. However, as we already know, because it has been repeated so many times previously, that Anne is no more waiting for Larry, as it had been a long time after he went missing, and she presumes that he is dead because it has been a long time since he went missing and there's no news about Larry, so naturally she too presumed that he was dead. After exchange of several letters, Anne and Chris are in love, and comes to the Keller household on Chris's invitation to propose marriage to her. This I'm not going to explain because we have also done this part many times before. Anne is firm in her belief that Larry will not come back and does not agree with Kate's view that Larry is still alive. So Anne is firm about her beliefs. She completely stands up to it that Larry is definitely dead, finished, and he will not come back. Only his ghost will. Of course, it won't. And she does not naturally she does not agree with Kate's view that Larry is still alive, because obviously if she believes that Larry is dead, then at the same time she cannot believe that Larry is alive. So this is very logical. After coming to the Keller home, Anne is disappointed and wants to leave because Kate does not want her to stay here any longer, and Chris is uneasy with Anne's presence in the house. So now Anne came with lots of high hopes and a mission, a purpose in her mind. But after she visits the Keller household, she feels very disappointed and she wants to leave because she realizes that Kate, that is Chris's mother, she does not want Anne to be within the house, because she believes that Anne should wait for Larry's return and she should not visit the house uh, before Larry. I mean, she should visit the house with Larry and for Larry, in the matter of saying. And maybe also because Kate Keller already knows why Anne Deaver is there to marry Chris, and she does not want that to happen. So she keeps on hinting, she keeps on saying like she's kind of frustrated with Anne and she doesn't want her around. And Chris is also uneasy because of this growing tension between his mother and his lover. So Chris also gets uneasy who to protect and who to stand with, and that is why N also does not want to put more pressure on Chris and his family, so she feels like she kind of wants to leave and go back. N feels reassured after he expresses his love and proposes to her to marry him. So up until this point, N had a kind of inkling, like she had a brief, you can say she had a strong idea that Chris has called me to propose to me so that we both can marry. But it is not a surety. No one has, like, Chris hasn't actually told her that I want to marry you. But now that Chris reassures his feelings for her, now she is assured that yeah, Chris really do loves me and I was right. So now she has a greater motive of staying inside the house, because now she's like a kind of part of the family. She's like a part of the house. Hearing Chris's explanation that he was ashamed to love her because of the tragedy he had seen around. I think we've read this part before too. Chris is hesitant to use the comforts and amenities he had, and even thought that he did not deserve her. So Chris is like kind of that, I don't want to use all these things. I don't want to use the comforts of life. I'm even ashamed of loving you because that would mean living a comfortable life with your loved one. And why is Chris ashamed of all this? I think we all know the answer. But okay, moving on. Anne makes him understand that he should not develop a feeling of guilt, as he had the right to make use of everything, including the money that his father had saved for him. So N is now telling Chris that you don't need to feel guilty. It's not your fault, and you have all the rights to make use of all these comforts, all these amenities, because you've earned them. You basically earned them, and you can even use all the facilities, all the money provided by your father too, all the money saved by your father also. Anne shares Chris's idealism and righteousness and has shunned her father Steve Deaver after he was found guilty in supplying defective cylinder heads to the army. So Anne and Chris have a kind of same mentality, like they're both idealist, you can say. and they both share the same vision, same high values, as a matter of fact. And that is why she also abandoned her father when he was proved guilty of that crime. An idealist is a person who is guided more by ideals than by practical considerations. So you see that an ideal person can have an ideal that all the people should be treated equally. Okay, all the people should be treated equally. So this idealist person now can go both ways, positive and negative. In a kind of saying positive way, you can say that this idealist person, since he believes that everyone should be treated fairly and equally, he would treat women and men the same. He would give the exact the exact amount of hard work to men and the exact amount of hard work to the women, inconsiderable of their I believe of their mental capacities, of their age, of their physical capabilities. So this is what an ideal person is, but this might not be practical in many cases. See, like if in a factory, you have to deploy some people, but you can use the women which are physically incapable or physically weaker than men to use some kind of mental work because they are smarter than some other men. All right, but the ideal person, he wants to treat everyone fairly. So the ideal person would not look into practical circumstances, but in fact, he would try more to be fair and considerate and provide everyone the same amount of work, no matter if that person is capable of doing it or not. So like an idealist person can provide the same work of carrying 30 kgs down the slope, up the slope, to a 60-year-old person, and the same exact same work to a 20-year-old person too. So in these cases the idealist can go negative. But if he treats women and men the same way, equally, let's say in a mental situation, he expects them to behave the same way and behave rationally. So in this case, he's going towards the positive aspect. So a person who cherishes or pursue high or noble principles, purposes, goals, etc., that is an idealist. Idealist is often considered an impractical person. So idealist is basically the extreme of having noble ideas, you can say. Like my father is an idealist and I am a practical person. I guess everyone's father is an idealist, isn't it? So moving on. So we were here that N had shunned her father. She had cut off all connections with her father after he was found guilty of a crime. So that is, after he was found to be a criminal, she cut all ties with him. She disowns him, refusing to visit him in jail. She doesn't even visit him in jail. Having no concern for her father, N avoids answering questions related to her father. So now that N is not at all worried, not at all concerned, she just doesn't give a damn about her father. So she also feels bothered when people ask questions about her father because she doesn't know what the hell is going on with her father. She doesn't simply care, okay? And she gets frustrated. So why are people asking about my father? Because she wants to get separated from him, from his identity. From she doesn't want any kind of connection between him and her to be there. So that's why when people associate her with Steve Deaver, she feels kind of frustrated, kind of tensed. Related to she feels, and when she asked about him, having N avoids answering questions related to her father. And when asked about him, she is ill at ease and says, "I really don't know." So she just replies with, "I really don't know." It means that I actually do not know what is happening with him. Like I literally do not know. The same as that. She says that she had wept on hearing about his imprisonment after he was found guilty by the court, but when she came to know about Larry being killed by the defective cylinder, she realized the seriousness of his crime. So she says that she had cried a lot and lot when she first came to know that my father has been guilty of this crime and my father has been imprisoned by the court. She was crying for the loss of his father, right? She was crying in sympathy to her father, but when she realized that Larry also died, that Larry must have also died, like at that time obviously she believed that Larry did die, due to the defective cylinder heads. Then she realized that the crime is really serious. Like, a crime happens somewhere and you don't actually realize the seriousness of it. But when it happens right next to you or right in front of you, or let's say when it happens to some close and near relative of yours, then you suddenly feel it like hitting you. You suddenly feel like it's very real, and it has a great consequence, right? Like, I mean, you get the sense, the seriousness of the crime suddenly. And before that, there are murders happening, rapes happening, all those kinds of bad things that are happening around all over the country. But then when a near relative of you or someone happens to be involved in that crime, suddenly you see the seriousness of, oh my god, what a big thing he did. I mean, what a big crime he did, or what a serious crime he did. Suddenly it hits you what kind of a serious thing it was. So the same thing happens with N here. N talks very harshly about her father, saying, father or no father, there was only one way of looking at him. So N is very judgmental about her father. She said that whether he is my father or whether he is not my father, he has done this crime, so he should be treated like this. It doesn't matter what connection he has with me. Okay, so in this way. Keller told Anne how her father had cried half the night on hearing about Larry's death. So Keller tells Anne that Steve Deaver had cried half the night when he heard that Larry had died. But Anne is too harsh again and says that her father should have cried the whole night. Oh. So now Anne here is saying that, oh, why did my father cry half the night? He should have cried the whole the night. So now she's basically saying that, why did he cry only half night? Why not whole night? All right. So, okay, moving on. N thinks that Chris is lucky that he can love his parents. So N is now kind of like, you can say deep down, slightly jealous of Chris. I don't know if it has already turned into slight jealousy, but she still feels kind of like Chris has an advantage over her because Chris has some such loving parents who loves him and he can love them back. But the same does not go for N. When George tells the facts about the case accusing Keller, Anne intervenes, saying that the court had exonerated Keller after finding him innocent. So when I think you remember that George Deaver comes to visit the Kellers, and when George starts accusing of the Kellers that my father is innocent and in fact you are the main perpetrator of the crime, some of you might know the meaning of proprietor. So proprietor basically is the owner of a business or a holder of a property, but it can be used to say like you are directly related to this thing, or that you have you have a direct hand in this thing. You see, so you can say in a kind of thing that someone who is directly involved in something. Like proprietor to a crime means that you were the person behind actual person behind this crime and the person directly involved in it. So Anne intervenes during this time and she cuts off George and she says that no, Keller is not guilty, he is an innocent person, and the court itself had exonerated Keller because it believed, like her, that Keller is not guilty. So exonerate, I've already told many times, it means to absolve someone from blame for a fault or wrongdoing, to release someone from a duty or obligation. So you can basically say that the court released, or the court absolved the blame against Joe Keller. Absolve means free from guilt, obligation, or punishment. Declare someone, sorry. Absolve basically means declare someone free from guilt, obligation, or punishment. So the court declared Joe Keller free from any punishment or guilt, or any fault, or any of any blame for a wrongdoing or fault. So I think you should try to remember all these difficult words, because this is exactly why we're studying English honors, right? To become a master in English, to become an achiever in this subject. So that's why it's more important to remember these words than to remember the answer to the questions. Because the questions can change, the answers can change, but the words would never change. Wow, what a great saying. Where were we? And supports the Kellers vehemently. I think it's called vehemently. I don't know exactly, but I ask you to check it up. or how it's pronounced. And in ways vehemently means in a forceful, passionate, or intense manner. Like she says this with full of josh, you can say. She says it with a full of josh that no, 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 this is not the thing. You are wrong. You are wrong here. This is not right. I believe the Kellers. I stand with the Kellers. So she's in like a kind of this. So she supports the Kellers vehemently, disagreeing with George. So she disagrees with George in a forceful manner or in an intense manner, like you can say. No, George, I don't agree with you. This is wrong. Like full of Josh. Again, the same thing, full of Josh. Yeah, that's the word. Okay, so when he says that whatever Keller family owns is by dishonest means. So N is completely against George when he says that Keller family has done their business by wrong means and whatever they own is by wrong means too. She is perhaps blinded by her love for Chris, whom she wants to marry. So the author here is saying that perhaps she is blinded by her love for Chris. Despite knowing the real culprit in the defective cylinder case, she conceals the facts known to her in order to avoid any kind of obstacle coming in the way of her marriage with Chris. So obviously now she believes that Chris and I are so close to marrying. She doesn't want anything to come in between this, and that is why she purposely, or you can say she kinds of like let go of the fact that Joe Keller is actually the real culprit, and she decides to ignore it and continue with her marriage. Like, I'm saying this sarcastically, but she really does this actually, because according to the letter, as we know that N had the letter, so basically N already knew that Joe Keller was the real culprit. So N knew that he was the culprit, but still she chooses to ignore this fact because she wants to marry Chris and she doesn't want any kind of other drama to happen in between now. Maybe she's thinking like, let me just marry Chris once and then I'll finally bring the letter out in front of their eyes and show them the real truth. Ha ha ha. But as of now, until I marry Chris, there's no revealing of the letter, like all this kind of bullshit. No idea actually why she did this, but the most debatable idea is this one. Like from here to here. I believe this can also be highlighted. And I'm just telling you that you don't need to exactly highlight everything I do. Like you can create your own notes from all the highlighted text that I have provided in this chapter. You can create your own shorter notes. Don't copy them exactly line by line, word by line. You can create your own shorter version of notes from all the text that I've highlighted. I've basically highlighted all the important stuff. So N is quite surprised by the concern Keller shows for her father. He is ready to help George settle in the neighborhood with his family. So N is very surprised because obviously she believes that since Steve Deever had said in the court that Joe Keller is the real culprit, so she believes that Joe Keller must be hating Steve Deever for trying to crush his image, for trying to tarnish his image. But in fact, Joe is very understanding of the Keller. No, sorry, Joe Keller is very understanding of Steve Deaver, and he even wants to help George settle with his family in the neighborhood again. So she's kind of surprised by this. Keller says that after he completes his term in prison, he would help Steve begin a new life. Chris's honesty and his idealistic qualities impress N. In N's view, Chris is doing nothing wrong if he creates in Jim a desire to get better. So you must remember Jim Bayless. Jim Bayless is the doctor who is a good friend of Chris Keller. Yeah, Chris Keller, his name is. Who is a good friend of Chris Keller, and Chris motivates him to pursue his higher calling, to go and do experiments, do research work, instead of working as a normal doctor here. And N agrees with this view of Chris. According to N, if Chris spends his father's money, he is also helping his father with his work. So she also believes now in this idealistic way that if Chris is spending his father's money, then he is helping his father in his work. I don't know where this comes from, but it must, since it's written in here. N is embarrassed to meet Keller's neighbors as she remembers the neighbors calling her father and her family murderers. So obviously, if somebody calls you a murderer, you'd feel very ashamed to meet them eye to eye the next time you do, right? So the same goes with N. Now she's very embarrassed. She feels kind of ashamed with meeting the same neighbors who had once called her and her family murderers, and does not want to face humiliation again naturally. N trusts Keller and is not prepared to believe Sue's words that Keller was guilty in the defective cylinder case. So, if you remember, then Sue Keller had once let slip to K, like she'd kind of obviously intentionally told her, but she made it look like it kind of slipped. See? So, she told N Deever that she still believes, that is Sue Keller, Sue Bayliss. Sue Bayliss, she still believes that Joe Keller is guilty and he just got out due to some underhanded means and cheap tricks. And N does not believe Sue Bayliss. She does not agree with her words. She learns that everyone in the locality believes that Keller is involved in the fraud. So soon she gets to know that actually everybody knows around here that Keller is the main culprit behind the fraud. And ironically, very ironically, they are the ones who were calling the wrong family murderers at that time, despite knowing the fact that they were innocent and in fact Keller is the guilty person. And they have made good connections with the Keller household. So they are calling the wrong persons murderers, but they are having connections. They are sitting, they are partying, they are enjoying with the murderers, with the actual culprits. So this is very ironic here. N knows that Chris would not have forgiven his father had he been involved in the case, and trusts Chris as much as Chris trusts his father. So N knows and believes that. So you can see, kind of think, you must be thinking that N had the letter. So obviously she knew that Joe Keller was guilty, right? But in the letter, it clearly says that Joe Keller believes his father to be guilty. It means it's not proven. He does not have any absolute proof that his father is guilty, but he takes it to be that his father is guilty. Right, he just assumes it. He presumes that his father is guilty, and on that presumption, he committed suicide. But after Joe Keller reveals to everyone, Joe Keller accepts that I am guilty, and then she shows him the letter. Then they feel even more miserable that Joe was really right, and he really died because he really died in consequence of Joe Keller's action. Because if Joe Keller hadn't actually done this at least, then maybe Larry wouldn't have died, right? So up until here now, she only knows that Larry Keller committed suicide because he believed his father to be a culprit, but she doesn't know whether Joe Keller was actually culprit or not. And that's why this is written that N knows that Chris would not have forgiven his father had he been involved in the case. So N also thinks that maybe Joe Keller is not involved, because if he was involved, then Chris, being an idealist, would not have forgiven his father. And N trusts Chris as much as Chris trusts his father. So like kind of betrayal of trust, cross. N patiently tries to convince Kate to allow her to marry Chris and not to make him feel guilty of his intentions to marry her merely because she believes that Larry is alive. So N tries to convince Kate that please, woman, let us marry and don't try to make my future husband guilty by saying that Larry's ghost will come around and haunt you at nights, won't let you sleep easily. So she's kind of saying that don't make my future husband guilty by saying that I'm Larry's fiance and Larry is still alive and blah blah blah. N requests Kate to accept the death of Larry. So N is requesting Kate now that you old woman go and accept Larry's death. You are going senile. We will send you somewhere to old foster home if you don't accept our marriage. So she tells Kate that she wanted to show Larry's letter to her to her riot to hurt Kate's feelings. So basically what it means here is that she tells Kate that she wanted to show Larry's letter not to hurt. I think it means not letter to her not to hurt Kate's feelings, but only to prove. So what she's saying is that she's telling Kate Keller now that I'm really sorry. I'm really sorry. I did not wish to hurt your feelings. I only wanted to show you this letter as a proof that Larry is dead, and now we will attach this letter in our marriage documents. Of course, they would. So if you haven't read the chapter, you won't. I believe you will miss the sarcasm in this and go on with the wrong information. But I assume very naturally that you have read the chapter and not listening to this video in your first try. So, where were we again? Yeah. But to prove that Larry was dead, Anne had known in advance from the letter that Joe Keller was as much guilty as her father, but was living in denial despite knowing the fact. Now, this is really messed up. Of course, the IGNOU books, there's curriculum there, why God. It's all messed up, but going according with the text, Anne says that, oh, of course, I knew your husband, that that cheat. Yeah, he's a guilty person. I knew this from advance. I knew this all the time, but I hid this fact. I didn't let anyone know about this fact. Why? Because I wanted to marry Chris, man. Yeah, that's why I hid this from everyone. Now what are you gonna do? Of course, she's not saying it like this. So Annie is saying that I knew in advance that Joe Keller was as guilty as my father. But still, according to the text, she was living in denial despite knowing the fact that her former lover Larry had committed suicide, shamed by his father's involvement in killing his fellow pilots. So she kind of like lived in denial, just like Kate. Like Kate lived in denial that Larry died. In the same way, Deever was living in denial that Joe Keller died because of his father's involvement in the crime. Alright? Okay, so her desperation to get married to Chris did not allow her to reveal the truth about Keller's crime. So she's like, come on, man, I don't care who died, who lived, I just want to marry Chris. So even if your son died, I don't care, I won't show you the letter. Unless you make me do so, right? So she's like, I will use this as my final ultimatum. I won't use this until I really, really have to. She does not want to become a villain for the Keller family by getting Keller arrested. So she has this noble feeling, obviously an idealist, like I said, like my father. She's kind of an idealist. My father is a hard idealist, and it is really, really, really a headache. So yeah, so she, being an idealist, believes that she does not want to be the bad stone in the Keller family. She does not want to upset things. She does not want that everyone starts hating her, of course. She does not want to become that villain who ruins the peaceful life of the Kellers, who brings disruption and chaos in amidst them and gets Keller arrested. She refrains from impeaching Keller until she feels compelled to do so in order to save her relationship with Chris. So she stops herself, she refrains, controls herself from what? From impeaching Keller. Impeaching means like charge Keller of a crime, or call into question the integrity or validity of something. So she does not want to question Keller and rebring those memories again, surface those memories again, which were left buried deep inside. So she doesn't want to get all of this case started again because she wants to marry Chris. So you can say, yeah, that her motives are definitely selfish, and they are governed primarily by a fundamental drive for self-preservation. Like she's kind of trying to preserve her own feelings. That's her agenda, right? She has feelings for Chris, and for that she's ready to do everything. That's her problem. But it's not everyone's problem. Like George Deever doesn't care that she loves Chris, and for that reason she doesn't want her to marry Chris, in fact, because George Keller believes about the truth. George Deever, he believes about the truth, and he is ready to face everything. He is ready to risk everything for the truth. And in the case of Anne is ready to risk everything for the sake of love, for Chris, right? So they both have their own agendas, and definitely it's a selfish one because it's their agenda. It's not everyone's agenda. So if George Deever is able to let everything go because he can see that Chris and Anne are genuinely in love, and I should let go of this, then George Keller would not be called selfish. In the same way, if Anne confronts the Keller for the truth and lets go of her love for Chris, and does not let her love for Chris come in between this, then she would also be called unselfish. But since she is basically working for her own love, it may be for some other person, but it is for her own love, so definitely she would be deemed as a selfish person. So this is what I was trying to explain you, the fundamental idea behind being a selfish person. You can thank me later in the comments, of course. So moving on, her motives are selfish, governed primarily by a fundamental drive for self-preservation. This is how self-preservation is done, like self-preservation of love, self-preservation of justice in the case of George Deever, self-preservation of image, self-preservation of like you can say of image, of reputation, of family comforts and all that in the case of Joe Keller. All right, so this is kind of self-preservation. Being insecure, she wants love and shelter in the Keller household, of course, because she couldn't receive love from Steve Deaver, as he had to go to jail, and there's nothing told here about their mother, I believe. As far as I know, they haven't mentioned their mother, so most probably I presume that either she's dead or at least she does not live with them. So she couldn't get the love of both of her parents. So deep inside, she has a kind of insecurity and a longing for love and affection. So being insecure, she wants love and shelter in the Keller household, and now she is seeking it in the Keller household. She shares with Chris that she has nowhere to go and would accompany him wherever he wishes to go. Anne is successful in clearing the way for their marriage without the feeling of guilt. So N is finally successful. She clears the way for their marriage, and without having any feelings of guilt that I hid this or I did this wrong in order to achieve my marriage with Chris. Assuring Chris that she would not ask him to go against his father by handing him to the concerned authorities. So she reveals to Chris the truth about his father's case and about his father's involvement in the crime. But at the same time, she assures him that I would not ask you to go against your father. It is entirely your decision. You should decide it. So in this way, she kind of let go of her guilt that I did this for the sake of my love. And I confronted Chris. I told him everything. So I didn't hide the truth either, and I didn't let go of my love for Chris either. So she kind of like balanced both the things out, and in this way she paved a way for her marriage without taking on the feeling of guilt. So this was a beautiful and absolutely wonderful characterization of Anne Deaver. Like, I'm not saying I did this beautifully, I explained this beautifully. I'm saying the characterization was beautiful. Like, the character was very beautifully made, you can say, kind of like the role she was given. For the next chapter, we will definitely do George Deaver. I don't believe George Deaver would be as exciting because there's not much told about George Deaver in the story. But still, George Deaver is at least a shorter one, I believe. So until next time, see you.